Osama bin Laden was once the most wanted man in the world after the tragic events of September 11th. 2001, he became a symbol of terror feared by millions of many. He was pure evil, a man responsible for so much pain and suffering. But here's the shocking part to his wives and children. For many years, Osama bin Laden was a loving husband and father. He had a big family, 4 wives, and at least 20 children. His first and most important wife was Najwa Ghanem. She married him out of love and spent 25 years by his side, giving birth to 11 children. But she had no idea what kind of man he would become or the nightmare that would unfold because of him. For Najwa and the other wives, life of bin Laden was full of pain and sacrifice. They lived in a world where women had no voice and no choices. One day, he took all 4 wives into the desert and forced them to stay there for an entire night. And what happened next will shock you. For years, this story remained a secret, but now the truth is finally out. How did bin Laden's first wife escape? Where is she now? Stay with us as we uncover what was hidden for so long. The future wife of Osama bin Laden was born in 1960 in Syria, in the coastal city of Lakia. Her name was Najwa Ghanem, and she spent her early years in a beautiful, peaceful place by the sea, surrounded by fruit trees and vegetable gardens. Her father was a merchant, her mother a housewife, and together they raised a big, loving family. Najwa was the second child, and she had a close bond with her sibling. She was just like any other girl, attending a girls' school, afraid of snakes, and always getting lost in books. She loved to play tennis, ride her bicycle, and spend hours drawing. Her parents were conservative Muslims. But young Najwa had a mind of her own. At first, she refused to cover her head and loved wearing bright, colorful dresses. She was full of dreams, living a simple but joyful life, never imagining the hardships that awaited her in the future. From an early age, Najwa Ghanem was well acquainted with Osama bin Laden, not as a stranger, but as her first cousin. Her Aunt Aliyah had been married to Mohammed bin Laden, a wealthy Saudi contractor, and a close friend of King Abdulaziz Al Saud. Their marriage was short, and the only child born from it was Osama bin Laden. He belonged to one of the richest and most powerful families in Saudi Arabia. The bin Laden family owned a massive construction empire, the Saudi bin Laden Group, which had direct ties to the Saudi royal family. Osama's father, Mohammed bin Laden, was a billionaire who built grand palaces, mosques, and entire cities. But Osama's childhood was not as privileged, as it seemed his father divorced his mother Hamid shortly after he was born and arranged for her to marry one of his business associates, Muhammad Al. As Osama grew up in this new household with his mother's stepfather and 4 half-siblings, though he later inherited around 25 to 30 million, his interests were never in wealth, even when he attended King Abdulaziz University. He focused more on religion than on business or pleasure. Najwa and Osama had known each other since childhood. He was just 1 year older than her. Everyone around them saw him as a quiet, polite, and mysterious boy, unlike other wealthy Saudi children. He never flaunted his family's riches. He was serious, deeply religious, and always lost in thought. Had always felt drawn to him. She knew that he had lost his father early and had been raised by a stepfather, and she felt sympathy for him. In their culture, it was common for cousins to marry, and for Najwa, Osama seemed like an ideal match. He was handsome, well-mannered, and came from a powerful family at the time. She had no idea that the quiet boy she admired would one day become the world's most feared man. Despite all the rumors, and Osama's marriage was not forced. It was a marriage of love and choice. For a long time, waited patiently, hoping Osama would take the first step and ask for her hand. She knew he cared for her, but he was always quiet and reserved. Finally, when she turned 14, Osama gathered the courage to discuss the idea with his mother. Aunt Aliyah was overjoyed. She had always wanted the two families to grow even closer, so she immediately gave her blessing. But not everyone was happy about the idea. Najwa's mother was heartbroken. She didn't want to see her daughter leave for Saudi Arabia, far away from her family and the life she knew. She begged her to reconsider, warning her that she would rarely see her parents again. She reminded her that in Saudi Arabia, life for women was very different. There would be no more colorful dresses, no freedom to walk alone, and no life outside the home. She would have to wear a black abaya, cover her face, and live in isolation, as most Saudi women did in the 1970s. Najwa hesitated for a moment. She knew her mother was right. Life in Latakia had been so free and full of color. Marrying Osama meant leaving everything behind, but in the end, love won. She looked her mother in the eyes and firmly declared, "I love Osama, and I will marry him." For the first time in her life, she stood her ground and made a decision for herself. In 1974, 15-year-old Najwa became the wife of 17-year-old Osama bin Laden. Their wedding was a joyful moment in her life, a day she had dreamed of for so long. She wore a beautiful white dress, feeling like the happiest girl in the world. However, the celebration was simple and modest. Osama's family followed strict conservative beliefs, and loud parties were not allowed. The wedding was held at home without music, dancing, or laughter. Guests enjoyed traditional Syrian dishes. But the event was quiet and serious. Even so, Najwa felt truly happy because she had married a man she loved, and she left her family behind and traveled with her husband to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, ready to start her new life. But Saudi Arabia was not Syria. Here she faced strict rules and restrictions she had never known before. She could not work, drive, or even leave the house without Osama's permission. She was expected to wear a black abaya, and for the first time in her life, cover her face with a veil for the girl who had once loved bright dresses and refused to cover her head. This was a huge change, but she was young and in love at that moment. Nothing else mattered, only being with her husband. She had no idea how much her life was about to change. In 1974, at just 15 years old, Najwa began her new life in the Saudi city of Jeddah. She and Osama settled in the home of his Aunt Leah, who generously gave them an entire floor to live in. At first, Na felt happy and peaceful in her new home. She dedicated most of her time to her religious studies, spending long hours reading the Quran in the garden. She admired the beauty of Jeddah, a city so different from her hometown in Syria. Life seemed comfortable. Osama even hired a housemaid to help her. Her husband spent much of his time praying at the mosque, continuing his education, and working in the family's business empire. Meanwhile, Na stayed home where she prayed, cooked Osama's favorite meals, and studied home decor and fashion. She dreamed of creating a beautiful home filled with warmth and love, but despite the comforts, loneliness soon settled in. During the day, Najwa was alone for hours, while Osama attended university and worked in the evenings. They would have dinner together, but after that, Osama would often spend time with his male relatives and friends discussing politics and religion. Once again, Na was left alone. She later admitted that the best part of her day was sleeping time, because that was when she felt closest to her husband. A year after their wedding, Na became pregnant with her first child. She was overjoyed when she gave birth to a son, Abdullah. Osama hired a second housemaid to help with the household. For the first time in her life, Na felt truly fulfilled. She was raising a child. She had a husband, and their family was wealthy. What more could she ask for? In 1978, their second son, Abdul Rahman, was born. By this time, Osama was still focused on his education, unaware that soon his life and the life of his family would change forever. As the years passed, Osama bin Laden's views became more extreme. Family life interested him less and less, while religion and war consumed him more and more. Everything changed after 1979, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. For Osama, this was not just a distant war, it was a call to action. He felt it was his duty to help the suffering Muslims. And soon he was not just supporting them financially, he was fighting alongside them. He began traveling constantly. His visits to Pakistan and Afghanistan became longer and more frequent, leaving Najwa alone with their growing family. Despite his absences, Osama bought a huge mansion in Jeddah for his wife and children. Najwa dreamed of turning it into a warrant and beautiful home, but she had little energy. She was almost always pregnant. Her first 4 children were boys, and in Saudi culture, this was a great blessing. Sons were seen as a symbol of strength and honor, and Najwa felt proud. But while Na raised her children, Osama about her life with Osama, but it was clear she refused to follow him into extremism. His third wife, Kiria, was deeply religious and stayed loyal to him. Until the very end, she remained in Afghanistan, living under harsh conditions. Even after Osama became the most wanted man in the world, his fourth wife, Seem, also stayed with him. Both Kaya and Seem were captured by Pakistani authorities after Osama's death in 2011 and were later sent to Saudi Arabia. As for his children, their lives took very different paths. Some escaped extremism, just like Omar, who built a new life in the West. Others remained loyal to their father's ideology, believing in his radical beliefs. His eldest son, Saad bin Laden, followed in his father's footsteps, joining al-Qaeda. He was later killed in a U.S. drone strike. In 2009, another son, Hamza bin Laden, was being groomed as Osama's successor. He became a rising figure in al-Qaeda, vowing revenge for his father's death. But before he could take power, he too was killed by U.S. forces. In 2019, some of Osama's other children, including his daughters, have lived in complete silence, avoiding public life. The story of Osama bin Laden's family is a story of women and children trapped in a life they never chose. Najwa never wanted to be the wife of a jihadist. She never wanted to raise her children in fear, hunger, and exile, her only crime was obedience, the belief that a wife must always follow her husband. No matter where he leads. In the end, some of Osama's family escaped, others stayed and suffered the consequences. But one thing is certain, his choices ruined the lives of those closest to him. Do you think NA made the right choice by staying with him for so long, or should she have left earlier? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more incredible real-life stories. Thank you for watching.